All right, welcome to episode 18 of Seize the Moment podcast. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Dennis Relojo-Howell. He's a founder of PsychReg, and he's featured on BBC News. He writes about mental health for various publications, and he blogs, and he's on social media. And welcome, Dennis.
Thank you for having me. I'm quite excited to be on your podcast.
Hey Dennis, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about your platform, psychologist.com, and its purpose?
Yeah, so PsychReg is a blog, a podcast, and an open access journal, and I also organize conferences. And also a lot of people ask me what's the reason behind the name. So basically, when I started PsychReg in 2014, it was just a directory of people whose interests are in psychology. So PsychReg originally stands for Psychology and Registry, but soon I developed it into its current platform.
Oh, that's really cool. And so it says here that you've been dubbed the world's first blog psychologist. So can you tell us a little bit about that and the history behind it?
Yeah, so basically, I travel to different countries and I actively advocate for the therapeutic value of blogging.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the publications in Malaysia called me the world's first psychologist. And I'm quite humbled by the recognition because it's a recognition of the work I do.
Yeah. And I actually agree with you there. I think blogging is super important, not only just obviously kind of for therapeutic effect. Well, for therapists, right, in terms of the therapeutic effect, but even I think people struggling with any sort of mental illness or any sort of physical ailments. So what brought you to blogging and what sparked your interest in it?
Yeah, because growing up, I've always been an introvert, and I find solace in expressing myself through writing. And so until now, I still have my diary as a child. I still keep it with me. And when I came in the UK to do my master's degree, I carried out a research project on expressive writing. Basically, expressive writing is the idea that when you express yourself through writing, you benefit psychologically because it allows you to make sense of what's happening with your life. It's also a good way for you to process your thoughts. So when I did my research, I found that some people benefit through expressive writing and some people do not. So yeah, basically that's the idea behind me launching my own blog. But fundamentally, I was really inspired by more popular blogs like Psychology Today, Psych Central. You probably heard about it, Very Well Mind. So I want to be, I want to create a blog similar to those, but I want to have a blog which is a podcast and an open access journal, and I also want to organize my events. So that's the idea, that's the mission of PsychReg.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Yeah, do you think that's to highlight the nuances in mental health? Because, for example, since it wouldn't be just blogging and it would be podcasting as well and these conferences that be organized, do you feel like that has more of an impact in the mainstream than just articles like from sites like Psych Today, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I want psychology to be more democratic. By that I mean I want it to be more accessible. Because if you're just offering psychology through articles, it's rather delimiting to some people who like to listen to podcasts or who rather read a more scholarly output through academic journals or rather go to conferences. So that's why I try to make PsychReg as multidisciplinary as possible or as multi-platform as possible.
Yeah. And what's your blogging journey been like?
My blogging journey, it traces back 15 years ago. I've been blogging for 15 years. I started as a personal blogger. What I mean by personal blogger is that I just like any blogger, you just share your thoughts, your opinions. That started when I was in my 20s, and then after 4 or 5 years, I relaunched my blog to be a travel blog because also when I was in my 20s, I loved traveling. So basically, it's just a platform for me to share my tips, my advices when I visit other countries. And then when I did my MSc, my interest has developed into mental health blogging. Yeah, but throughout my blogging journey, I've just used WordPress. Your listeners or you yourself might be familiar about it. I tried other blogging platforms such as Wix, but it's quite limited to its functionality. So I just stick with WordPress. And I take pride of being able to design my own website. Um, yeah, so basically, I designed SiteRich myself. I designed my personal website myself, and yeah, I love designing websites.
Back to what you were saying before, I could really relate to you in the fact that you said you're a natural introvert. Definitely, that's true in my case too. And like when we started the podcast, we found that it was like a great outlet to express ourselves as well. Leon also writes blogs as well. It's not something that I happen to do, but I found that through expression, it was a way to kind of organize your thoughts and talk about things that maybe otherwise you wouldn't, maybe with your friends, and maybe things that you think about to yourself. And yeah, it's a very interesting experience. Have you noticed that when you're relating your experiences in other countries, is there any kind of issue with the language barrier, or are people there translating for you, or?
Because with I've always blogged in English, although English is not my first language. I've always blogged in English, whether as a personal blogger or as a travel blogger or as a mental blogger, it's always in English. But I'd like to pick up on what you said about people blogging. Yeah, I think that's an important point to highlight because even the American Psychological Association, sorry,
Yeah.
with the website, they do have a number of articles advocating for people to express themselves through blogging. Even psychologists, even psychiatrists, they have their own blog. And you can see it with other platforms such as Psychology Today. And also here in the UK, like big mental health charities such as Mind and Sane, they also have sections on their blog where they invite people who struggle with mental health issues to share their stories. And
Wow.
yeah, I think there's freedom that we can gain from blogging, and it's a modern way to express ourselves.
Yeah. And what has it been like for you in terms of blogging? Like, what sort of topics have you blogged about? Or what were the most important topics in mental health that you've talked about?
Because Psychrich is user generated, so I would say that 90% of the articles that's getting published on Psychrich are written by the readers.
Oh, wow.
And the 10% that I publish myself, I'll share you a secret. These are sponsored content. So these are the articles that pays for the running of the website.
And what sort of
Yeah,
thing?
so I sorry, I don't really talk about mental health issues myself. Or on Psychrich, the things that I write about for Psychrich are basically press releases or sponsored contents, or sometimes just general well-being articles.
Oh, I gotcha. And what are some of the things that your users share or your readers?
Um, it's a mixed bag. Some of the articles are mental health stories, and also academics. They also share their current research, and also there are practitioners, psychotherapists, and psychologists. They write about their basically about their clinic, about the services that they offer.
And
Yeah.
so, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you to blogging, especially coming
Yeah.
from the
So
Philippines?
Yeah, so I originally came from the Philippines. I came here in the UK in 2013 to do my master's degree. I spent my childhood in a slum in the Philippines. I grew up in Malabon. Growing up, we don't have electricity, we don't have toilet, we don't have running water. But as a child, you don't really see it as a problem. But I only realized that it's a different kind of world where I spent my childhood when I went to the university. But I think what I always say to people is that I'm not trying to make it like a sub story when I share that I grew up in the slum. I think what I want to convey to people is that we all have our own struggles in life, but what I want to share to people is that you have to be resilient. Whether you're struggling with mental health issues or whether you have other problems with your life, relationships or finances, you have to be resilient. And I think resilience is a very important attribute that we have to learn in life. Yeah.
And sometimes we talk about on the show logotherapy and Dr. Viktor Frankl and his book Man's Search for Meaning. And I mean, for me, I think it's been pretty much like a foundational work for my kind of clinical work and my own sort of life and my own sort of struggles. And I think the thing that we
Mm-hmm.
learned from him is that humanity is sort of capable of such amazing things, especially, well, not especially, but particularly in this case in the context of severe trauma. And so, I mean, my question for you is going to be, how are you able to overcome that? I mean, that must have been horrific.
I always remind myself that, when you're struggling with something, there are more people who have um, worse condition than you. So um, nothing really in life is insurmountable. You can always find a way to improve your life. And I think you can also draw strength from the support of people around you. I'm very lucky that I have very supportive parents. I have supportive family. Um, yeah, my husband is also very supportive.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
so, in terms of your struggle, what were some of the things that were particularly helpful for you? Like, what were some of the things that people said or people did for you that made you think that, you know what, there's a reason to keep on going and to keep on living?
Um, oh, I don't know how to answer that question. Um, I think poverty. I think that's one. I would say that if not for my chemistry teacher in high school, I would not have gone to university. It was her who made me realize that going to university is a game changer.
Hmm.
I'm the first one in the family to go to university, and looking back, yeah, I think going to university really played a significant role in me going out of the slum. Because if I did not go to university, I think we would still be living in a slum. Uh, yeah, it just changed everything because after I finished my degree, I was able to get a job at a call center, and then I used what I've earned to pay for my master's degree, and then I soon became a university lecturer,
Oh, wow.
and then I got a scholarship here to do another master's degree, and it basically education played a significant role in changing my life.
Was it scary for you to go from your home to university, like that decision and then the journey there?
Yeah, it was quite challenging because I'm the first one to go to university, and obviously, going to university, I think it doesn't matter whether which country it is, but going to university is kind of a middle class thing. So coming from the slum, it's really quite foreign to me. Like what how will going to university benefit me, like because my parents never been to university. So yeah, but I just persevered, and also I also have to work while I was a student. I was working at a burger van in the evening
Mm.
to pay for my tuition fee. Yeah.
Well, and interestingly, so anytime that I kind of, well, not anytime, but a lot of the times when I hear stories about trauma and resilience, there's always some major sort of figure in the kind of in the center of it all. all. So there's always some teacher or some kind of like what would you call it? I guess like an inspirational figure who inspires a person.
Was that your chemistry teacher, or was it someone else?
It was my chemistry teacher. Because she just encouraged me to go to university. She said it's a game changer.
Yeah. What did she tell you she saw in you? What was it that sort of gave you that hope?
Because I think she realized that I'm quite hardworking, I'm quite diligent, because I always do all the assignments, even though I'm struggling, because chemistry is not an easy
No,
subject.
definitely not.
And I'm not really, how do I say it? I'm not really into hard science. So I don't really excel in her class, but she probably saw in me that even though I struggle with her class, I still stick with it. Yeah.
And from when you started to kind of learn about psychology, was it as a way for you to better understand yourself or sort of your situation?
Going to university and then doing psychology was kind of accidental. I was intending to go to do biology or engineering, but then I realized I'm not really into hard science, so I just pick up psychology out of nothing. But when I was already in my second year, I realized that this is an important course, because you learn about behavior, which of course it makes you deal with people more effectively, and you also understand about yourself. And yeah, on my second year, I learned to appreciate the value of psychology as a discipline.
Did it help you to relate to the other students more as you started learning more about how your own behavior worked and their behavior worked? Did you open up more, and did they open up more?
Yeah, I remained an introvert, even though while I was at university, I only had two close friends while I was at university. But I think one of the important learnings that I get from studying psychology is that human nature is varied. It's unique. So you just have to embrace your unique personality. You just have to embrace whether you're an introvert. You just have to embrace it, and then just make the most out of it.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the most important psychology or psychological concepts for people to know about?
I'm not a big fan of Sigmund Freud, but I think
Same here. I'm not either.
yeah, yeah, I'm not a big fan of him, but I think he has made an important contribution to psychology, because I think he's one of the first few people who made us realize that we can really study behavior in a scientific way.
And in terms of like, I wonder, so because the way sort of people view psychology sometimes is the way they view philosophy. So they would say, well, I mean, it's like this nice sort of academic-y science, right? We don't really understand how it would apply to our particular lives. Like, yeah, we might learn some stuff about kind of how human nature works, right? But how would that sort of affect my life in the day-to-day? What would you say to those people?
Because psychology is a very wide field. It's a very wide discipline. There's neuropsychology, there's biological psychology, and there's positive psychology. And when you're studying psychology, you just have to pick which subfield in psychology you can make more sense out of studying it. So for me, I more comfortable studying psychology from positive psychology, so and also health psychology. So that's why when I chose my research project, I explored the health benefits or the psychological benefits of therapeutic writing.
And can you, for our audience, can you tell us what positive psychology is?
Yeah, so basically positive psychology is the subfield of psychology which says that we can grow as a person, and it also explores how we can basically improve ourselves. Yeah.
And what are some?
Searching for meaning. Yeah, searching for meaning.
Oh, love that. That's literally what our show is about.
Yeah, so I know you talked about resilience, and I know that's something that's discussed in positive psychology. But are there any other maybe concepts in positive psychology that you resonate with that kind of speak to you?
Yeah, growth and self-esteem. I think those two are very important. It's important that we look for ways to improve ourselves and also to promote our self-esteem.
Mm. And what do you think of the concept of self-actualization?
Yeah, self-actualization, that's also another popular concept in positive psychology that we have to look. We should try to improve our lives so that we can, reach that level of self-actualization according to Maslow.
One thing that I particularly like, because the last episode that we did, we were discussing self-actualization and the relationship between self-actualization and this sort of self-transcendence in terms of the fact that you kind of shed your old identity and you're kind of in this sort of phase of growth and expansion. And and it's something I'm particularly passionate about, identity in terms of or identity in positive psychology, because I feel like it's usually your identity that can either make or break you, that maybe either holds you back, or if you know more about yourself, it's what can bring you to better places in life,
And
so
contribute
to
to
speak,
growth.
and contribute to growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important for you to recognize your strengths and weaknesses as part of your identity. Like what I've told you, I'm not really into hard science, so I did not go on to do biology. I did not go on to do engineering. I just did psychology, and I think it's important that you understand your limits as a person, but recognizing your limits, that should not really discourage you from doing other things. I think another example would be driving lesson. I I had several driving lessons in my life. I'm the only one in the family who can't drive. Uh, I, Eventually I just gave up. I think I realized that it's not for me. That I couldn't drive, but it did not limit me to go to the places where I want to go. I always say that I don't drive, but I've been to more than 20 countries, so I don't think I'm doing that.
Yeah, I like that. I respect that.
And so, Dennis, what do you think the world would be like if more people kind of studied psychology, or if more people knew about the fundamentals of even, let's say, positive psychology?
Sorry?
Yeah, so what do you think the world would be like if more people studied psychology or knew the fundamentals of positive psychology in particular?
I think we will be more tolerant and we will be more forgiving about our differences. I think a lot of people do not understand that humanity and personality are so diverse that you just don't have to look life in one perspective. So if we all study if we all study psychology, I think there's more humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this kind of there's an intro to this sort of nuanced thinking, right? You can see that there's multiple perspectives out there. For example, I mean, again, I'm not trying to get into this, but let's say in politics, right? People can be so polarized. But if let's say they understood psychology to a degree, they might try to actually try to understand each other and where they're coming from politically. Not to get political right now. I'm not trying to steer the conversation there.
Oh, you want to talk about politics?
No.
Political as well. Yeah, because I'm a Brexit supporter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But right. If let's say you're coming from that angle and you're explaining your position, wouldn't it be great if somebody actually fully listened to you and perhaps then gave their own points and then listened to you again and then kind of had a back and forth with you, as opposed to this sort of impulse reaction of, this is my side, this is your side, I think this way, you're wrong because you don't think the way I think, blah blah blah, like that sort of line of thinking.
Yeah, yeah, it's important that you kind of mention something about politics and how could psychology potentially improve the way we deal with people. I think when we try to if we have a background in psychology, it could help us understand that there's no single way of looking at things, whether in politics or in other aspects of life. Because I already mentioned it earlier. I'm a Brexit supporter, but I do not judge people based on like how they supported Brexit, whether they want to be part of the EU or not. Yeah. But so sometimes I get quite frustrated with because here in the UK Brexit is quite a divisive issue. Um, I get frustrated with people like if they find out that you supported Brexit, like how could you, like we have differences, but we have to learn, we have to respect, we have to respect our differences.
Yeah, and before making that judgment of like you said, like, oh, how could you think this way? It'd be better to first try to, before even that judgment, see why do you think this way, and then this is what I think, and then what do you think about what I think, and kind of that way. Or just to switch from politics, let's say to relationships. Say you're with your significant other, and it's fairly commonplace for people to get into little arguments or disagreements somewhere down the line. And and if, let's say, people in a relationship understood certain tenets of psychology, multiple perspectives, how to really listen and kind of break things down. That could be very helpful. That can foster a really healthy relationship potentially.
Yeah, this actually reminds me of, because just about a month ago I was at an international conference in Malaysia, and one of the keynote speakers, he's obviously not a fan of Trump, and he said that something along the lines of like being a Trump supporter is stupid. And well, it's quite interesting to see that a lot of the audience seem to agree with him. And well, you could probably understand, you could probably realize now that I'm also, aside from being a Brexit supporter, I'm also a Trump supporter. And sometimes when I say that to people...
Oh, just a moment, everybody. We seem to have... Dennis has left the convo, but that's okay.
Well,
that's a great part to exit.
Like, what are the odds that like that is the exit?
All right, so sorry for that disconnect. It was at a very pivotal point in the conversation too.
I forgot what I was saying now.
You know what's funny? It disconnected at the point when Trump was brought up, and then after disconnected, I was thinking, oh no, does he think we hung up because he said Trump? I hope not. It was an internet issue.
No. Resilience.
Yeah, so
that person who was at the conference and got the whole crowd to agree with them when they said that they were not a Trump supporter. Do you think that it's because they had authority, because they were speaking in front of a crowd, and that's why the crowd went with them? Or do you think...
I actually that's what I find interesting, because as I was saying earlier, there seems to be an obsession, or there seems to be like in social sciences and in psychology, there seems to be only one point of view that is rather represented. And it's funny because these are the disciplines who are quite vocal about diversity. So I was saying that because he's the first person of color to be appointed in that position. I'm not going to say the name of the society, but he's the first person of color to be appointed on that position. And before that, he actually preceded the first woman to be appointed as the president of the society. So I was thinking, like, what I said during the conference is that this is well and good that we're trying to achieve diversity, that you're the first person of color to be on that position, and she's the first woman. to be appointed in a position. But what we seem to be missing is that when we're trying to promote diversity in psychology or any other social science field, we seem to be not promoting the diversity of thought. So that's why it was rather easy for him to express his opinion about Trump. But if someone is to express his opinion about Obama, it would have been a different story, because you could easily say that that person is racist. And so I said that, well, for a change, I am an immigrant myself, but I support Trump's policy and I also support Brexit. But the thing is that that's quite unusual, because the thing is, in fields such as psychology, I don't know if you've heard about Jordan Peterson,
Yes.
the Canadian psychologist. People like him who's got those views are rather underrepresented in the field of psychology. And also, I don't know if you know the publication Quillette. It's an Australian publication founded by Claire Lemon. Those opinions by I also don't know if you have heard about Noah Kahl. He's a psychologist at Cambridge, was kicked because of his research on intelligence. So what I was saying is that when we're trying to promote the discipline of psychology, we should also actively promote diversity of thought. Not everyone in psychology thinks the same.
Yeah, absolutely. For also what's interesting is when we're presented with certain figures in media. For instance, for example, let's say Jordan Peterson. I'm aware of him. I've seen him, let's say, on Joe Rogan's podcast, and from what I've seen, I definitely like him from a more nuanced perspective. But then I'll say this too: the way he's portrayed in the media, it's he's just instantly sort of. Let's say demonized, you can say. And what's interesting is that a lot of people who are watching this, whatever outlet he's on, they draw an instant, like an impulse sort of judgment on him based on how he's presented. They wouldn't look necessarily into the nuance of who he is and what he's about. And they may just, when asked about Jordan Peterson, also instantly demonize him or toss him to the side. And I feel like that's unfortunate, because we should be trying to see who these people are, totally, not just one perspective of who they're portrayed to be. And I think that's very important, because sometimes when you fully learn about who a person is, you may see that there's more to the story. You may actually then begin to appreciate the person or see where they're coming from, and maybe still disagree with them on some levels, but respect them as opposed to demonize them. Yeah.
Well, I also think that that's depending, though. So, I mean, it depends on what their perceptions or their views are, obviously, because there are some views that are just outright racist and sexist.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, that's true. It's just that sometimes we're only getting part of the story. And what's important about what Dennis is talking about is that we should try to learn all we can about these people and then draw conclusions from it. Or also rather respect their diversity of thought. But I agree with, yes, if you're going to, let's say somebody's a legitimate sexist or a legitimate racist, yeah, I agree with you. That's a different story. It depends on what they're saying. But I see his point.
No, I hear you. And I think the point that both of you guys are making essentially is that we need to give people a fair chance to speak.
Or also just take a nuanced look at them. Yeah.
Okay, that I absolutely agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Dennis, for you, in terms of just kind of to go back to blogging, how do you feel like blogging, if at all, has helped people empathize with each other?
I think blogging plays a role in giving people an additional outlet to express themselves, because especially when you're talking about mental health, there are certain aspects of mental health that you're not comfortable talking with a mental health professional or talking with your family or friends. You're more comfortable sharing it to a mental health blog, because you know that the readers of mental health blog can relate to the live experience that you're having in terms of mental health. There's actually a research, I just forgot who the author is, but it was done in 2013, and that more and more people, adolescents, young people who are experiencing mental health, they're more comfortable expressing themselves through blogging rather than talking to a mental health professional.
Wow.
And I that's an important aspect that mental health professionals should realize, that um, there's something that prevents people who are struggling with mental health seeking professional help. So if these people go to blogging, perhaps they should try to diversify how they reach to these people.
And what do you think it is about blogging that makes it easier for them to express themselves? If you had to guess.
Because yeah, one of the key elements of blogging is that it's professional. It's personal. It's personal in the way that it's pretty much like, the way you keep a diary. It's the language is more forgiving. It doesn't really care about grammar and punctuation, or the appropriate use of words. And yeah, it's conversational. So I think that's why blogging is so popular. And yeah, way back when Tumblr was still there, yeah, people love it, that you could just express just in a few words. Yeah, and of course, everyone can create a blog. It only takes a few minutes for you to create your blog. So yeah, I think that's why it's so popular. And that's why a lot of people love to express themselves through blog. And of course, blogging comes in many forms. It's not just textual. You could also create a photo blog. You could also create video blog, like such as this one. You can express yourself in YouTube,
Yeah.
and all that.
I know you didn't say the name of the person who created that study in 2013, but it is very interesting, though, that highlights something very important, which is if there's a sort of sense of privacy that a person feels in their expression, they're basically expressing themselves, you can argue, if not 100%, close to 100% of what it is they're truly feeling inside, especially if they don't want to speak, let's say, to a therapist or someone in their family or somebody close to them about what they're feeling. And that is very interesting, because then what you're doing is a huge service, if you really, really think about it. Because giving all these people a chance to talk about what it is they're feeling in a place that's specifically for mental health, that's tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah. And interestingly, what I found is, like, even through my own blogging. So when I was like much young, well, not even much younger, but when I was younger, it was much harder for me to be vulnerable with people. And so I found that blogging, like in incremental steps, as I wrote more sort of personal and deeper articles, that it was much easier for me to sort of come out about, let's say, kind of personal lived experiences and the way I maybe perceived myself at certain points in my life. And so little by little, I would open up about different things in terms of my childhood, my relationship with my stepfather. I talked about being bullied and all of these different things. And the beauty of blogging is that, like, you kind of open up a little bit, you get really good feedback from people who've experienced the same things. And they're like, wow, oh my God, I can't believe it. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. And then you open up a little bit more. And then some other people, or maybe the same people, are like, wow, oh my God, I had the same experience. And sort of little by little, you find that through blogging, that it's a really great foundation and a sort of way to build intimacy with other people. That you kind of do it in writing first, where it's a little bit safe. It's hard for me to call it safe because it is the internet and it's full of like really terrible trolls. But the point is that with blogging, like with the people who do give you positive feedback, it gives you the reassurance that not only are you not alone in the world, that there are people who do want to empathize with you, but then also you're not like a freak. And that's kind of what I learned about myself. I was like, wow, like I have all of these experiences that other people have had, and they're like, yeah, you know what, that actually is pretty normal. And I think that a lot of us learned that through writing and through obviously presenting ourselves or presenting ourselves through our work to other people. Yeah. Is that, Dennis, is that the way you felt?
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with what you said about, being more comfortable expressing yourself through blogging. Because I think there's also an element of, being anonymous, because when you share your mental health stories, you don't really have to reveal your identity. And there's also a number of people who will be reading it, that you could perfectly relate to what you're going through.
Yeah. And have you ever shared some of your stories about what it was like growing up in the Philippines?
I usually share it not through writing, but through podcasts such as this one,
Mm-hmm.
and also at radio station and TV.
Mm. And
Yeah.
what's the sort of feedback that you've received?
Uh, I don't want people to feel sorry about me, like like growing up in Islam. I always try to convey the message that it's resilience. It is by growing up in Islam, but you should not feel sorry about me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do people usually feel when they hear your stories? Do they ever tell you that it helps them?
I think they're inspired, like especially here in the UK, that they say that with all of the resources here, that you could go to university here for free, that you should really seize the opportunity of trying to improve your life through education, and you should not take things for granted, like toilet, like electricity or running water, because in other parts of the world there are people that would happily have those resources. Which actually brings me back to I don't want to sound political, but there was a report 2 days ago on Sky News. I don't know if you knew Sky News.
Yeah, I know of it.
But there was a report about a mom. She was housed on a container van, and the way it was reported is that she was not happy about it. She's complaining, and I can't help but actually send a tweet to Sky News saying that, you know what, this is the picture of the place where I grew up. I showed her the picture of Islam in the Philippines, and I told her that you're so lucky because it's provided to you by the council. It may not be your ideal home, but you're getting it for free.
Yeah.
What I was saying is that my parents, we don't have the luxury of running water, electricity, and a toilet, but they managed to raise all three kids decently. So what I'm saying is that it reminds me of a quote. I don't know who said it, probably Ellen Keller, when she said that I used to, I cry because I don't have shoes. And then I see a man without a feet, somewhere along those lines.
Yeah.
But before you complain, try to realize how lucky you are, how fortunate you are. Yeah.
Well, just a question: what do you think blocks us from becoming aware of that? Because every time I'm aware of what you're talking about, all of my petty little issues fall away from me. And that's interesting. Why do you think people don't think like that as often? Why do you think we're not aware of that at all times? This sort of relative, like how good we might have it relative to someone else, and maybe it's not proper to complain and things of that nature.
I'm sorry, it's the question, but the way I understood it is that what you're saying is that how can blogging change that thinking, like the complaining? Is that what you're asking?
Well, we can go there, absolutely. What I was actually saying is, what do you think is blocking us from being aware of the fact that some of our issues, at least in modern society, aren't like that of those in other parts of the world? What do you think? Why do you think we don't think like that all the time?
I think that you have to realize that when you have a blog, you have a platform. So use it not to complain about what you don't have, but rather use it to inspire other people. That's what I'm trying to achieve with my blog. I use it as a platform for people to share their mental health issues, their mental health stories, but I'm giving them a platform not because I want them to wallow on their problems, but because I want it to be a source of inspiration. Yeah.
I mean, I would also argue that it's, kind of two-faceted or multifaceted, where so sometimes people think it's one or the other. So there are people obviously on the left who argue that it's not so much grit or resilience that we need to instill in people, but we need to work towards structural societal change, which I actually, obviously, because I am on the left and because I agree with the argument, I do think it's true. But then also I think there are parts of being on the right, it's true too, where people say that, we need to kind of help develop resilience and grit in people. So I don't necessarily think in this case it's either or, where it's to say that, okay, we should be grateful and not complain, or, let's say we're obviously ungrateful and then complain. I think we could do both. I think that we could build up grit and resilience and still work toward changing the things that need to be changed, like especially in terms of eradicating poverty. I mean, that is a structural change that needs to occur.
Yeah. Yeah, I think blogging plays a role in the sense that it can raise awareness, it can raise consciousness, whether politics or mental health. And I always say that blogging is all about creating conversations, and these conversations could potentially create those structural changes that we demand.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And Dennis, that podcast that you were talking about before, what's it called?
Oh, the podcast is called The Mental Breakdown. So it's the podcast arm of PsychReg. So it's hosted by Dr. Bernie Wilkinson and Dr. Richard Marshall. They teach at Webster University.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we could find it on YouTube, right?
Yeah, and I'll be happy to introduce you to them, because I think they would be interested to have you.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they do cover a range of topics in psychology. So basically, the target audience is anyone who's just interested about psychology, mental health, and well-being. Yeah. So after this video call, I'll be happy to send you an email just to introduce you to Bernie and Richard.
Oh wow,
appreciate that.
That's really cool. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah. And if we wanted to follow you online, where could we find you?
Yeah, it's funny because I used to be a social media manager, but I tried to limit my social media activities. I try to avoid Facebook most of the time, but I'm on Twitter. So just Google my name. Just search for my name on Twitter, Dennis Relojo-Howell. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I have a YouTube channel, but not on Facebook, not on Instagram.
And what is the Twitter handle of your PsychReg website? PsychReg.
Just PsychReg.
PsychReg. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. What's the Twitter handle for it?
PsychReg, it's PSYCHREG, PsychReg.
Awesome. And so now I'm curious, since you brought it up. So, what do you see as the link between mental health / mental illness and social media?
I'm quite on the positive side about social media. I think social media is good in trying to promote conversations about mental health. But of course, we have to be we have to limit ourselves with how much we spend on social media. One reason that I'm not on Instagram and I'm not on Facebook, because I don't like, taking pictures of places you've been or the food that you've eaten and then posting it on Facebook.
Yeah.
I find that I don't know what's the word for that.
Narcissistic?
Self-indulgent?
I don't like it. I don't like it. But I like the ecosystem within Twitter, because Twitter is more for like networking and networking with people with the same interests. Just like how I found you guys, it's because of Twitter.
Yeah.
And also that Dr. Bernie and Dr. Richard, it's because of Twitter. So Twitter is like there's still an element of bragging in Twitter, but it's not as blatant as Facebook.
Yeah, and it's mostly academics sort of bragging on Twitter. It's not so much like people posting like Instagram photos of trips that they've taken.
Yeah. And also it's like because on Facebook you seem to be bragging with people that you know, so that's kind of like in your face bragging,
right.
Whereas in Twitter you're bragging with strangers, so they don't really know if that's bragging or just a bit of sharing.
It's like you're sort of going away to brag, so your friends won't hate you and everybody on Twitter can.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so, Dennis, I mean, just kind of from my own curiosity, if let's say somebody were to sort of ask you who were struggling, like how do I develop grit or how do I sort of become more resilient? What would you say to them?
How do you develop resilience? Probably the best way, I would say, read the book of Angela Duckworth. She's got an interesting book called Grit. And you can also find her on YouTube. She raised a number of points about promoting grit and resilience. And also, you have to, I think you have to remind yourselves of what other people have gone through. Like with me, like if there's something like something really difficult or something uncomfortable, I have to remind myself, like, what about the people during the war? Like they were able to survive, they were able to thrive with their situation. So surely this is nothing compared to what they've done, what they've been through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I often cite, or not often, but as often as I can, I cite Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, especially with clients of mine, because if that man could have survived the Holocaust and still have come out a really wonderful human being,
Exactly.
yeah, I think it's possible for pretty much any of us to do anything close to that, obviously in context of the experiences that we've experienced, which were nothing like that.
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, final questions, thoughts?
Honestly, no. But honestly, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Dennis. I feel.
Like talking to you both.
Yeah. I feel this sort of like I don't know. I feel very comfortable with you. Like for example, the way like let's say at the beginning of the call when you were talking about how you grew up as an introvert and your chemistry teacher inspired you. Honestly I can relate to like things like that. I don't know. It feels like talking with a friend right now. So it's nice. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And
We could collaborate together because I also organize events dedicated for mental health bloggers.
oh, cool.
It actually started like this. I was talking to someone in America, and then he came here, and he was actually one of the speakers at my conference last December.
Wow.
Oh wow, that's really cool,
Yeah.
man.
Keep in touch, and let's find opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so, I mean, my final question is, and I mean, this is going to be a little bit broad, so obviously, okay, if it's kind of tough to answer. So, what would you say in terms of sort of overcoming trauma or in terms of resiliency is one of the, if not the most important factor?
I think you have to acknowledge how you feel about the situation. That's I think that's important. Like that you're not happy with it, that you're not comfortable with it, but you also have the desire to improve your condition, improve your situation, and that you're willing to take the risks and you're willing to seek professional support.
Determination.
Yeah, determination.
All right, thanks.
And also, yeah, I think it's also important that you have the humility to acknowledge that you need other people's help. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I really love that
Absolutely.
answer. A lot of times it's this pick yourself up by the bootstraps mentality, which doesn't really. So obviously, depending on what your struggle is, obviously some people can, in whatever context, right? Let's say maybe minor to moderate. But if let's say somebody's struggling with severe depression, or even a lot of times moderate depression, they need help, and that's okay. It's okay for all of us to ask for help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah, so just I think we have to understand resilience. That it's not just about like being so gritty and being so that I can do it on my own, but it's also the courage to seek help. That's also an important element of being resilient.
Yeah, being interdependent, working with other people, them seeking help from you, you seeking help from them, collaborating. It's amazing what can be done when people work in a team. I could definitely say that with this podcast for sure. This wouldn't be possible without us. Without more, if it was just myself doing it, I don't think we would have gotten as far as we've gotten, and we would not be able to meet people like yourself. And it's truly inspirational what it means to work together with others.
Yeah. And I feel like we all do need each other. Like, I mean, to a very good extent. And I say something similar to that with my clients, right? So, like, I have a private practice and I'm a business owner. And especially here in America, I mean, I'm sure it's kind of similar in the UK too. There's this mentality of, oh, if you're a business owner, you're self-made. You pretty much have sort of picked yourself up and you've created this sort of conglomerate and you are the only one who is sort of responsible for it. So, not true. So, my clients are the foundation of my work. If I didn't have them, if they didn't sort of seek my help, or even the times help me, obviously, not just financially in terms of supporting me, but helping me in terms of my own sort of quest and my own sort of introspection and my own knowledge. I mean, my entire business wouldn't exist. So it's like sometimes we have to kind of humble ourselves and understand that we need each other, that there's no such thing as an independent person, not in any sense of the term.
Yeah, and I'd like to bring back that to blogging, because blogs would not exist without the readers, without the contributors. Yeah, that's why Psychorage exists, because of readers, because of the people who contribute to the website.
Yeah, and I can also imagine that the bloggers on Psychorage pretty much like help other people seek help.
Yeah, because obviously they're sharing and they're sharing their passion about mental health.
Yeah.
Well, Dennis, it was a pleasure having you on. Thanks for coming on, and have a great day. Thank you. And guys, if you want to follow us at Seize the Moment Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, and at Seize_podcast on Twitter. Remember to hit the subscribe button.
Hit the bell.
Like the video, hit the bell. And see you next time.